Welcome back to the podcast, episode lucky number 7. Adam. I'm Kieren. My name's Kieren. I am a nutrition coach and a white belt under Adam Childs, black belt, Alliance Sydney, who's sitting across from me. Adam.
What's that, brah? What's that?
That was terrible. This will be edited out. We'll start again. What's up, guys? My name's Kieren. So in today's episode, if you listen to episode number 6, it's an awesome account of a very shortened account, even though it was about an hour-long podcast, but it was an account of Adam's time in Brazil, where he lived,
training in Brazil, Jiu Jitsu grind. Yeah, I mean, it was... the episode was over an hour or whatever, but could talk. It feels like decades could talk about the things that
live there for 5 years. You talk about it for 10.
Yeah,
Oh man. So at the end of that episode, if you caught the end of that episode, we said that episode number 7, we have a Q&A, and we put out to the audience to submit questions for the Ask a Black Belt segment that we're doing for lucky episode 7. So we got some awesome responses here. We curated the list. Thank you first of all, thank you to everyone who submitted a question. We really appreciated it. We curated a list of 4 questions that we have. Awesome questions here from ranging from white belt to purple belt. So we have a pretty wide demographic here of experience and some excellent questions to ask a black belt.
Oh man,
pressure's on. So
let me just get my Google open in case I don't know. No.
The trusty old Google on the fly. So first,
do you reckon like when you hear like, I don't really listen to the radio, but if I'm in the car, like
no one listens to the radio, man.
Well, yeah, I know. Apparently, a lot more people are listening to the radio.
Really?
Nowadays or at the moment.
Those people should listen to our podcast.
Yeah. I mean, but anyway, I'll have the radio on because it just comes on when I get in the car. And when there's like sort of, they have like little quizzes or whatever where, callers can win $400 or $500 or something like that. I'm always like, aren't you just taking this phone call in front of your computer? So like you could just Google the question and the answer. Like, I mean, some of the radio stations aren't stupid. Like most of the quizzes are,
difficult to Google straight away.
Well, yeah, like you have to, answer these 10 questions in 30 seconds or something like that. Yeah. But as a generalization, I'm like, why don't you just like Google the
Well,
question?
did you see, this is an aside, I swear we'll get into the jiu-jitsu soon, but did you see, it's super old now, but it's a really viral video, back when the first guy to win Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he cheated with a similar sort of system. There was someone in the crowd was giving him cough cues.
Yeah.
And
I've seen that.
Then he won, and then like that night they noticed that in the hotel room that they put him up in or whatever, he was having a massive argument with the woman he was with, like his partner at the time. Yeah. And they were thinking, hang on, you just won $1 million. Why aren't you celebrating? Why are you arguing? And the argument was that he went too far. The plan was for him to stop at like 500,000 or something like that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So for it to not to be sus, but they got cocky and went too far, and he took the $1 million, and then they pinned him for it, and he lost everything. And
yeah, right.
Yeah,
so it's funny you say that because not that long ago, I only know the story you just mentioned because not that long ago, I watched a random YouTube video that was something like, top 10, cheaters getting caught or something like that. And that one came up, and I can't remember any of the other ones, but man, people can be super creative, super clever.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the ones are a bit outdated now, like people cheating in ways that aren't possible nowadays due to technology, or vice versa, ways that people cheat nowadays that wouldn't have been possible
due to technology.
Yeah, there was an Olympian that cheated in
talking about the Russians? Steroids.
What's that movie called? Icarus?
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I sat there, if anyone listening hasn't watched Icarus, highly, like it's
on Netflix.
Is it still on Netflix?
It's still on Netflix.
It's an Academy Award winning, right? Documentary.
Yeah. Joe Rogan talks about it all the time.
Does he? Fuck that dude.
We're bleeping that out. Joe Rogan is our Lord and Savior.
Yeah, it's so good. It's I sat down to watch it just thinking it was a generic cycling / Lance Armstrong documentary, steroid documentary. And, I just like watching documentaries a lot of the time, regardless of the subject. And then I had no idea like what I was sitting down to watch.
Oh, wow.
And that it went into all like the whistleblower and the Russian doping in the Olympics and what the Russians and KGB, man, such a good documentary.
Really good
If you're into documentaries and you haven't seen Icarus, man, get on it.
Yeah.
So good. How did we get onto that subject?
Let's not even worry about it. So the first question,
I feel like I had a great anecdote.
You did, but there will be another anecdote from Analogy Adam.
Wait, no, I got it. The Olympics, the cheating in the Olympics.
Oh, that's right.
There was a guy who, because you know how in fencing, or maybe you don't know this, but in fencing, it's all like they have sensors in the the what are they called, sabers, or I think depending on
pokey stick.
Yeah, pokey stick. I think depending on the category of the fencing category, potentially has different names, but that's all there has sensors and electronics and everything to register if it's a hit or not, because it can be milliseconds, right?
Yes,
it's all about I don't believe the sport is based on this, like, oh, I would have killed you and been fine. It's like, I stabbed you a millisecond before you would have stabbed me. We both dead.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And he essentially rigged the sensors and the setup and everything, and so he was able to override.
Oh wow!
The official system. So his hits were registering before, or hits were registering that shouldn't have registered. Yeah, I can't remember the details.
Holy moly! Wow.
But it's like a way of it cheating that wouldn't have existed 20 years ago, right?
Well, the problem with that is it's all on film, so they can slow it down and see, hang on a minute.
Well, yeah, I'm not, I don't even know the details of how we got caught. One that you probably more versed in, Kieren, is the one where the Jamaican bobsled coach put weights in the front of the sled.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Remember we were talking about it the
Cool
other day,
Runnings,
Cool Runnings.
Yeah.
And you don't remember in the movie,
No,
Cool Runnings?
Man.
Oh, like I
watched it in high school. We had a teacher, and I swear we'll get into the jiu-jitsu soon. I keep saying that. But we had this like history teacher that was, maybe he wasn't the best. So he would play Cool Runnings at least to our class at least 3 times a year. You just wheel in, when we had those wheeling TVs. TV. Yeah, you'd wheel in the TV, chuck on, and we'd all scream Cool Runnings, and you'd put it on. And
dude, so good. Like,
I
didn't realize it as a kid. Like, I didn't realize that when it was like a video class that the teacher was just phoning it in. I didn't realize that. But when I was living in Brazil teaching English, I was video classes, bro. That's how you phone it in. That's when you're like, But anyway, they find out that their coach in Cool Runnings previously had gotten busted for cheating by putting weights in the front of the bobsled to make it heavier.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, there you
Jiu-jitsu.
go. Okay, jiu-jitsu. I swear we're getting into jiu-jitsu now. So, ask a black belt. We put out the call, and the call was answered. So the first question we have here is from Anthony, who is a blue belt, and asks, what should each belt, effectively from white belt to black belt, be focusing on? So what should each belt be focusing on throughout their jiu-jitsu journey? I
mean, it's a pretty loaded question. Like, you could spend a long time answering that question. I will answer that. I'll say what I think you should focus on each belt. But I think more importantly than what each belt should focus on is you need to ask yourself, what goal are you trying to achieve? So ignore the belt for a second, right? But your personal goal is going to kind of dictate what your goals or objectives should be at each belt. So if your goal is to be, a very high level competitor and potentially win world championships and super fights and all that, your belt goals would be slightly different to someone who is a full-time, doctor or lawyer or something and trains.
Like you're casual
you're just someone who trains once or twice a week just for some fun to de-stress after a hard day. Or if you're someone who wants to open a gym and be an instructor, right? So that's the first thing. Right? So does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you want to, for the ease of this, do you want to assume that we're addressing the masses here? Like, someone like Anthony that, you know, he trains fairly regularly, he's passionate about jiu-jitsu, but has other things, isn't trying to pursue it as a professional athlete?
Well, I mean, Anthony is, you know, is one of my students, one of your training partners. I've actually never had that direct conversation with him, but Anthony does have other things going on in the sense that, you know, he has a full-time job. He's a uni student as well, yet he still trains like 5 to 6 days a week, like often twice a day. He does every single competition. The last competition, Anthony was the first one there, the last to leave, did every single division. So I've actually never sat down and had the conversation about, look, man, are you wanting to make a career through jiu-jitsu, or are you just frothing on it till you graduate? I don't know. But anyway, let's just assume for the masses, like you said, obviously would start at white belt, right? I mean, what you should focus on as a white belt, in my opinion, is assuming you're not coming from another, you know, a white belt that was a Division 1 wrestler in college, a bit different, right? But if you're just a white belt, you've never done jiu-jitsu before, okay? I think first and foremost is learning and understanding some of the core movements in a safe way, right? It seems obvious to say it when you already train, but we take for granted that brand new people don't know how to do a back roll or a forward roll, right, without rolling over their neck and straining their neck or hurting their spine or something like that, right? So as a white belt, I think it's super important to firstly focus on some of the fundamental movements and be able to execute them in a safe way, because the amount of times white belts get injured training with other white belts, man, it happens all the time. And a lot of the time they injure themselves, right? Because, you know, not because of, they just don't know better, right? And you could even be a fit, healthy, athletic white belt, but you come into the gym, your first jiu-jitsu class, and, you know, you try to do some particular movement that your body can do, but all of a sudden you're trying to do that movement in a weird, contorted way because it's jiu-jitsu and it's incredibly dynamic, and you've got 80 kilos on top of you and then you strain your own back or something like that, right?
Right. So we're focusing on the fundamentals and injury prevention at white belt for the future, setting yourself up for the future.
Yeah, I think that's I really do think it's important. Like, I mean, as I want to see the growth of the sport, and having someone seriously injure themselves in their first month of training,
that's not good for longevity.
It's very easy for people to be like, nah, this sport, I'm out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which I have a friend that's in that exact situation. He injured himself.
Yeah, how do you?
Yeah, so Zach,
right?
Yeah, my friend and business partner Zach, he injured his shoulder in jiu-jitsu. He was just pushed over, landed wrong on the back of his shoulder. He's rolling with a blue belt at the time. And he requires surgery now, and that was in his first couple of months of training. Yeah. Like, arguably the blue belt was being a bit too rough with him, or whatever, considering how just how junior he was. But I suppose that's the issue with being and maybe a conversation for another day, being a big, strong, like very athletic guy coming into it, but with no skill, rolling with someone that's a lot smaller but with a lot more skill. And I suppose that this particular blue belt, that his compensation for that was to, you know, put a bit of smash on.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, and I think you've just made me think it's worth mentioning as well. Like, I didn't want to spend this long talking about safety, but, you know, number one priority is your own safety. Like, as a white belt, you're not established purple or brown belt in competition roles where you're rolling with an equally skilled partner and, you know, things are more or less safe, right? So if you're brand new to the sport, you know, and someone's going by your definition is too hard, too aggressive or whatever, you know, just tap out, you know, like, and that you might be tapping out and because it's not for you. So what I mean is, like, let's say you're a white belt and you're rolling with another white belt even, and it's too much for you, and you tap out and ask them to stop or whatever.
Yeah, I've had white belts do that. Like, context, I am a white belt, but I've had brand new people off the street where maybe we're doing a roll, I'm letting them work, and then I reverse the position. And they're like, "Nah, I'm out. I'm not comfortable anymore."
Yeah. So, because some people you don't know, right? When people are brand new to the sport, for all you know, that person who's trying jiu-jitsu may have chosen to try jiu-jitsu because they have issues with personal space and they're trying to work on it.
Yeah,
or
course.
that person might have chronic claustrophobia, and then you don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, if you tap out because it's too much for you, I mean, maybe you need a slight reality check, and maybe the person you were going with wasn't even going hard, and it turns out just for you, jiu-jitsu, like it's not for you,
it's been
right?
intense.
It could be the case. But, if it is, let's say in Zach's situation, if it was a blue belt trying to put smack on you, well, man, that's like a whole nother issue. That's like in my opinion, that's not the correct culture for a gym, and that responsibility falls on the instructor.
Should send in the mat enforcer.
Like if you come into our gym, man, like
we're gonna smash you.
I'm
kidding.
I trust every single one of my students, like even the toughest, most unfriendly, no, we have no one unfriendly, but even like the super tough, active competitors, I know that they can, I don't even have to say anything to them, that if they're with a 1 week old white belt, that they're going to look after them. And
1 week old is in jiu-jitsu. We're not bringing in.
Yes,
We're not smashing babies.
Yeah. And it's happened all the time. I've had like particularly girls come in and be worried, and I know that big, what looks like a big, intimidating, unfriendly person, right, Kieren? I know that I can put them with that little 50-kilo girl who's a bit like unsure about, and I know they're going to look after them. I know that I can put you, because I don't let my students get into that. Oh, I need to smash this new person to feel good. But anyway, so Again, I spent a bit too long rambling about safety, but it's super important that you learn the fundamental movements so you can execute them without hurting yourself.
Yep.
And look after yourself, right? Because when you're new, you don't know if the instructor has your best interests at heart yet, right? If you've just walked into a random gym, you haven't been recommended by someone, you don't know. Maybe the dude is just like sink or swim. But then moving on from that, white belts can get lost very easily, and understandably, jiu-jitsu is incredibly complicated and dynamic. To simplify it, I like to give this advice. I go, there's 5 core positions in jiu-jitsu. If we ignore stand-up for now, right?
Everyone does anyway.
Yeah, everyone does anyway. No, let's include stand-up then. There's 6 positions, right? But anyway, there's stand-up. But on the ground, which is the more confusing part for new people, there's 5 core positions. Mm-hmm. You've got close guard, half guard, side control, mount, and back control, right? Obviously, there's then so many iterations of those 5 positions, but they're the 5 core positions. Each position has a top and bottom, right? So you have 10 core positions, okay? You can be in someone's close guard or they're in your close guard. So if you could aim, like if you're someone who needs something tangible in terms of like tangible knowledge to not be lost, if you work towards memorizing or learning 10 techniques, 1 for each position. So if you knew a technique from when you're in someone's close guard, and you know a technique for when someone's in your close guard. If you know an attack from mount, and you also know a way to escape mount, right? It's only 10 techniques you need to memorize. So then when you're rolling, you may not be able to execute that technique, but at least if someone takes your back, you know a back escape, right? You're not going to be there going, I have no idea what to do. You at least know what you're trying to do, whether you can do it or not, right? Same as if you take your opponent's back, people will take someone's back and they're like, but now what do I do? Right? We often take for granted that we're like, dude, choke them, right?
Yeah.
But new people don't know that,
yeah.
right? But if they've learned to choke or whatever, a collar choke, a rear naked choke, like whatever the technique they've learned is, okay, they might not be able to do it because their partner's defending, but
at least they work toward it.
Yeah, at least they know the objective of what they're trying to do. When you see like you're watching like a kid's little league game and the kid gets the ball and then he runs the wrong way.
Yeah, he doesn't know what to do. Yeah.
Something like that.
So for summary, for white belt, you want to first and foremost focus on the safety aspect of the fundamental movements. So we mentioned forward roll, back roll. Another fundamental movement would be the hip escape,
technical stand up, sprawl. I had a kid who again, we take a lot of this stuff for granted until it either goes wrong or if someone, preemptively teaches us these things. I had a kid years ago who did a sprawl and instead of putting his palms flat on the mat, his like thumb was sticking out. So instead of like all the fingers facing forward, his thumb was backwards, right? And so when he did the sprawl, he broke his thumb, and I see adults do that as well. Right. And particularly I've had adults do it who come from a yoga background because there'll be yoga movements where you put your thumb in that position. But anyway, sorry to interrupt.
So that's first and foremost. Once you have that down pat, then you want to move on to your fundamental positions. So ignoring stand up, you had the 5 fundamental positions. And if you understand one technique from each of those, that's 10 techniques to work toward and, get competent with those. And that's a good foundation. Yeah. So you have something to work towards in every position in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And then to wrap that all up, I would then say you want to be able to connect those positions. Okay. It's super important for beginners to learn as well, to connect like a guard pass to side control and then connect side control to mount or connect it to a submission or whatever.
Yeah, and then connect mount to the sub or what have you. So to work through the hierarchy of positions toward a sub.
Yeah.
Cool. Blue belt.
So blue belt, known as being kind of the hardest belt, arguably. So I'll try be a bit quicker because we want to get through all these questions before it's a 2-hour-long episode. But and we're still on question 1. But for blue belts, I would start to focus on understanding control of positions a little bit more, and some, again, I'm calling it fundamental, but like they start to become more advanced, but starting to learn, opposed to specific techniques, really starting to grasp with concepts, right? Because if you can then sort of understand, again, I keep saying the word fundamental, but if you then can start to understand like fundamental concepts, so to give you an example, things like with guard retention, fundamentally keeping your knees into your shoulders, not extending your guard away and opening the space, in your midsection, if you're talking about leg locks, the fundamental importance of controlling the knee line and things like that, I would start to really become comfortable with the understanding the bigger picture of certain techniques and positions.
Right. So the understanding there, if you don't necessarily have the finer detail of put hand here to do this, you can at least work toward controlling or working toward the larger concepts. So like working within that thigh region for a heavy chest base pass.
Keeping the back, understanding that, it's how you control the shoulders and keep back exposure and, things like that.
Okay. Purple belt.
So I think purple belt's when you can really start finding your individual game, your individual style. Of course, it can change a lot, right? Like you could change it at brown or black belt, or you'll speak to active, successful competitors who they're like, oh, I've been doing this since blue belt, and it's never changed for them. But as a generalization, purple belt's a good time. You tend to know enough and find the style that you enjoy or that you're good at, whether it's a guard player or a passer, or what types of passes do you like, or what types of passes do you have a knack for. I think purple belt's a good time to really start focusing on the sort of jiu-jitsu fighter you want to be. Again, that can change, right? Like examples, Marcelo Garcia, one of the best of all time, known for really good no gi as well as gi, like he's a world champion in the gi as well. but really successful at ADCC and things like that. He never really even did no-gi until brown belt. So it can still change. But as a generalization, purple belt's a good time that you have enough tools at your disposal that you can really make an educated decision and start putting things together on your own.
Right.
Whereas prior to that, a lot of it is, I don't want to say spoon-fed to you, but you just don't have enough yet to be able to build your own sort of jiu-jitsu, if that makes sense.
Right. So it's a time to explore potentially looking at a specialty or to put a bit of energy toward like a certain area and be very good at that area, understanding that you have a strong foundational core understanding of concepts, core understanding of positions and obviously the basics.
Yeah.
Okay. Brown belt.
Brown belt. So I think, brown belt's a good time that you can adjust like the game that you've been developing, or you can redefine it. But I think it's also a good time to start learning how to teach jiu-jitsu. Some people learn how to do that beforehand. Some people never learn how to do it. But I just, the old saying of you learn a lot when you teach, whatever it is, even if it's not jiu-jitsu, just any subject, you learn a lot when you start teaching. I think it's important, at least for me and the side of jiu-jitsu that I'm into, which is really understanding it and geeking out on it a little bit. I think it's important to understand how to teach and why you teach, because that also helps you understand, how you learn and why you learn and why you teach certain things in certain ways, why you teach beginners sequences instead of combinations and things like that. I think brown belt's a good time, especially if you're someone who wants to open a gym, right? Of course, then you should probably have been learning how to teach a bit earlier.
Do you think now, from my understanding, some people, some black belts out there, some masters of jiu-jitsu have the requirement that in order to be awarded a black belt under them, at brown belt you need to teach. You have to teach.
Some people have that. There's no big governing body, right, that dictates it. We spoke about it when we talked about jiu-jitsu being in the Olympics or not. Judo's different, has a big international, like the organization. Jiu-jitsu doesn't have that. We have the IBJJF that have certain requirements that a lot of people follow, but other people don't. Yeah, there's a lot of people who are, there's no way you could deny them being a black belt, but IBJJF wouldn't recognize them as a black belt because they just don't tick their requirements. But IBJJF is just an organization, right? And individual gyms do the same thing. For me and for where I came through with Fabio, there was no, you didn't have to do some sort of test to get your black belt. You would do tests for your other belts, and it wasn't like, it was just a way to make sure that you're up to speed. Do you really know what you're doing? Are you just able to execute it because you're a natural, or do you actually understand that, you can do this submission from this position? But at black belt, it's something different, right? Like it's more than when an instructor's giving you a black belt, it's more than, you should already know all that stuff by the time you got your brown belt. Like it's just something else. So you would never do anything for it. Whereas I know other gyms, they do almost like not a gauntlet as in how people line up and whip you with the belt, which is a silly practice, by the way, but like a sort of thing where, the people who are grading for their black belt, it's like 2 hours of nonstop rolling.
Yeah, I think I've seen a few YouTube videos on that where they're just getting smashed for 2 hours and the poor guys.
So, that's up to the individual gym. Some individual gyms or organizations, I've heard of that a lot. You have to teach or whatever. So if that wants to be a requirement, but I just think it's an important learning tool, right? But if we ignore the teaching for a second, brown belt again is a good time to really be refining your game, right? If you're talking about people who are a bit more IBJJF orientated, brown belt is when a lot of the leg locks become available that aren't available at lower belts. So if we're talking in the IBJJF world, I mean, you should have been working on that at purple belt, actually, like if in preparation for your brown belt, but that's something to consider as well.
Okay, and finally, black belt, what are you working on?
Oh,
what are you focusing on?
I think black belt's when you realize you still suck.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the cliche thing is like that it's, the journey begins at black belt or something like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's an awesome achievement. When I got my black belt, I was super stoked. I'm still stoked with it, but, it's just obviously I'll be a black belt for the rest of my life. So as time goes on, like you end up being a black belt for longer than you are colored belts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In that regard, what am I working on? Just the constant evolution of my jiu-jitsu, right? And it's going to depend on your situation. For me, I'm constantly looking to improve my teaching methods, constantly trying to improve the way I get through to my students, the way I structure my classes, me as an individual. Fabio's on the other side of the world to me. I do a lot of self-study, so I will do whether it's just drilling with opponent, like a partner, trying to problem solve techniques or positions, whether it's watching instructionals, whether it's watching competitive jiu-jitsu and learning from that, whether it's calling Fabio or other competitors, instructors that I know and asking them specific questions. But, it's a never-ending pursuit of knowledge, right? I think jiu-jitsu is similar to, not similar, but it's like if you're a doctor, right, you never stop learning because technology changes, medicine changes, right? Like, they don't cut you open for an appendectomy anymore. It's keyhole surgery. Like, if you, so you have to, it's like a lawyer, right? Laws constantly change. If you just think like, I'm a black belt, I don't have to do anything anymore. No.
Yeah, right? Then you won't be a very good one, hey?
Yeah. So just constantly just understanding you'll be a student of jiu-jitsu forever.
Awesome. That was a really comprehensive answer. And thank you again, Anthony, for submitting that question. Next question we have next question is from Oliver. Ollie is a purple belt, and he asks, do you ever have a point where you went from thinking you were shit at jiu-jitsu to being not shit at jiu-jitsu? If so, at what belt did you reach this point and why? So did you ever go from thinking that you were shit to thinking that you weren't shit anymore? Or do you still think you're shit?
I still think I'm pretty shit.
I agree, you are pretty shit.
Look, yeah, it's a tough question. I mean, I think you have to be okay with the fact that there will always be someone better than you. Even when you're a world champion, there'll be someone better than you. At some point, right? Someone will always take you out. You can't be the best forever. So I think that's important to be okay with. But when did I? Probably, when last episode we were talking about my time in Brazil, and when I first started training there as a blue belt with the competition team, it was quite a shock, like how much I was getting my ass kicked. I would almost cry leaving the gym. I think maybe towards the end of my blue belt days, like I was very, very clearly one of, if not the best blue belt in the gym, and we're talking at the time the most successful competition, not just team, but gym in the world. I pretty much won every competition I did in Brazil. Like I medaled at the Pans, unfortunately didn't win, like I'm not trying to say I'm amazing, but the evidence was there, right? But some of it just comes down to your own belief in yourself. Even when I stayed a blue belt for ages from Fabio, for years, people would be like, man, he's going to give you your purple for sure.
How long were you blue belt for?
I mean, compared to other people, not that long, like 2.5 years. But
you were training full time.
Like full time.
Yeah, it was your career at that
point. And then even when I got my purple belt, I was like, do I really deserve this? So I think that's to some degree is normal. But if you're really unsure, there's there's only really one way to find out, right? And it's to compete, I think, really. If you're really unsure that if you're shit or not shit, the only way to really test it is on the mats in a competitive environment. If that's not your thing, because you've just maybe you're, I have another student who's like 65 years old, right? Recovering from prostate cancer surgery. Okay, probably doesn't want to go compete, right? How can you justify yourself? Well, there's the knowledge of jiu-jitsu as well. Like, if I put that student through a whatever belt test exam, like, would they know the answers to the questions, right? Do you have faith in the person who is grading you? So, if you don't trust your coach, your instructor, then you're constantly going to question if you're any good. If you trust your coach, right? Like, I always trusted Fabio. Even when I got my purple belt and I had a moment of like, oh, do I really deserve this? Like, no, I know I deserve it. There's no way Fabio would give out a fake purple belt.
Yeah, because if you extrapolate from that, if you don't think you deserve it and your coach does, then you're right. You're not trusting them and you're almost challenging their decision or challenging their judgment.
Maybe you could put it like that, yeah. But for me personally, yeah, it was kind of towards the mid to end of my blue belt journey when I went from getting demolished by everyone in the gym to, was starting to give a hard time to the purple, brown belts, even some of the black belts. Okay, I'm not saying I was better than the black belts as a blue belt, but I could start to give them tough roles. But man, there'll always be someone who can smash you. And then now I'm a black belt who, I often bring up Levi because Levi and I spent a lot of time training together as purple and brown belts. Whenever we get together, Levi just makes me look like a white belt again. He's an incredibly talented athlete. So there'll always be someone who can smash you. So you got to be okay with that.
So to summarize, you felt maybe you weren't shit when you got purple belt?
yeah, maybe, yeah. But yeah, there'll always be someone who will make you feel shit.
And if you do, your advice to that person would be to get out and compete and
get out and compete, bro. And and if you're really unsure about yourself, I mean, if you've got a good coach, sit and talk with them. Like maybe I think a good instructor should be able to offer you some, more than just teaching you jiu-jitsu techniques. They should be able to help you with, I don't want to say life coaching, but, help you with your thought processes and things like that. So talk to your coach if you're super unsure.
Yeah, that's good. So thank you, Oliver, for that question. Next question number 3 comes from Ian. Ian is a white belt and he asks, when traveling and visiting different gyms, is there anything a lower belt should do, expect, know, or be aware of? So what's the etiquette when traveling and visiting another gym?
This is a tough one, not because it's hard to answer, but it's tough because a lot of the things you should know aren't directly taught. They're indirectly taught just by spending time in a gym. So by the time you learn them, you're usually then not a lower belt anymore. But I'll mention some of them now. If you're in a rush, you could watch a YouTube channel I saw.
There's almost like there's a Kieren Lefebvre YouTube video about visiting gyms.
Yeah, Kieren did a YouTube video on this, but you received a lot of comments telling you stuff that you didn't know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I constantly get comments from people, white belts or higher belts around the world, just basically informing me of different. Anytime I do a video mentioning etiquette, or not even that, just anything random that I've experienced with. I mean, I've spoken about this before, but a prime example is asking higher belts to roll. I did a YouTube video about selecting training partners to progress your jiu-jitsu from a white belt's perspective, And I got corrected to say that, that's an etiquette thing. You can't ask higher belts to roll. Another one that I learned.
Because you didn't know, right? Because I don't really influence that at the gym.
Yeah, exactly right.
Sorry, I don't enforce that.
Yeah, and that we spoke about that. I think it was like episode 1 or even episode 2. We spoke about culture, new versus old, and that definitely came up. So go back and listen to that if you want to hear that discussion. But another one, for example, that I didn't know was a thing. At some gyms, you are required to wear a rash guard under your gi if you're training in the gi.
That's stupid.
I didn't know that was a thing. Apparently, it's a hygienic thing because a friend of mine who trains at another gym, that is enforced. That's their rule. And so things like that you need to just do just in case.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're traveling, you should probably have a rash guard with you anyway, right? You should have your no-gi stuff with you anyway.
Yes.
So if they tell you to put it on, put it on.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not a doctor, but is it more hygienic to wear a rash guard? I don't know.
Man.
Like I feel like if the gym was so dirty that you're gonna get ringworm or staph, something like the rash guard ain't stopping it.
Maybe it's a comfort thing. Like,
but I also find it weird. I know of gyms that enforce that.
But you can't compete with a rash guard.
Right. You're not allowed to compete.
So I never wear my rash guard under my gi to condition for competing. Because
then all of a sudden you compete without the rash guard and you feel weird.
Yeah, it throws you off. It's like if you always wear a mouth guard, you're always going to wear a mouth guard on the competition scene as well. It's the same.
So I find that rule weird. I believe, unless a doctor or someone or a dermatologist or something wants to chime in and tell me otherwise, I don't think it is any more hygienic. As long, it's the gym owner's responsibility to make sure the mats are clean and the environment's clean and the students wash their gi.
Yeah. So outside
just a ploy to sell more rash guards, I reckon. But outside of that,
outside of the basics, like, bring a clean gi, bring your no gi kit.
I think I don't want to mention every unspoken etiquette rule because that could take a while. Like you said, you're not supposed to ask higher belts to roll and things like that. I think if you just want to keep it simple,
yes,
2 main things. Firstly is you should by default, this is for now, I mean, if you're listening to this episode in 10 years time, right, who knows what the rule set is then and what the norm is, but as of 2021, I would say, look, by default, assume that the gym follows the IBJJF rules. IBJJF is slowly becoming less relevant, but I mean, it's just a safer rule set to follow unless you're told otherwise. You don't want to be a white or a blue belt and go in and start trying to do heel hooks and leg reaps and these techniques that are restricted to lower belts in IBJJF rules, right? If they tell you otherwise, then cool. But even like Absolute MMA, some of the best leg lockers in the world, they only allow people to start doing leg locks from blue belt and up, right? So, I mean, just assume they follow those rule sets unless you're told otherwise, right? The second thing as a sweeping statement is just, I mean, it's super outdated in my opinion, but just kind of assume that you're I mean, you're almost not allowed to interact with higher belts.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know that's a broad statement, but I'm trying to cover all extremes. If you visit some gym that is super old school, man, like you're not allowed to roll with higher belts. You're not allowed to, you have to greet when you arrive in the gym, you have to greet everyone in order of belts. So like you have to greet the head instructor first, and then you can't say, just say in between the head instructor and a brown belt, there's a blue belt. You can't greet that blue belt on your way to the brown belt. Like you got to greet everyone in order of belts, right? Like just assume that it's this super outdated, misogynistic, hierarchy system. I'm putting a negative twist on it, but I'm just saying that as a way to not put your foot in it if you visit a gym that is that super old school mentality.
And I think in my limited experience, but I will add one thing that may seem obvious, and ads, you can chime in on this, but I think going back to the basics, if you're going to visit a gym, contact the gym first. Like,
it's not a bad idea, right? I mean,
and assume that there may be a mat fee. I know that some gyms do charge a mat fee. Bring that just in case.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a business, right? You can't just walk into a Anytime Fitness, which in Australia is like a workout gym.
Yeah.
You can't just walk in and be like, yeah, cool, I'll just do a workout. Man, they're a business. They got bills to pay.
Yeah.
100%. Sometimes if you're visiting a gym that's from the same team that you're from, they might let you train for free or give you a discount, but don't assume, right?
Yeah.
Just because they're from the same team, they might just be a small gym and maybe they only opened not long ago.
Yeah, so like contact the owner, bring a mat fee, or ask them about the mat fee and be early. You know, all of that really just basic etiquette and good manners. That may seem common sense. Make sure you tick all those boxes. Don't piss anyone off. And then when you're there, follow Ad's advice.
Yep.
Assume that if you're a white belt, you're less than nothing.
Yeah, I know. It's super outdated, and that's why a lot of these etiquette unspoken rules, my students don't know them because I don't really enforce them at all. I'll mention them every now and again, but even something, for example, you might not know this, Kieren, because we never do it, but when we're doing the classic running in a circle, warming up, right? You're supposed to do that in belt order too.
Yeah.
We almost never do it, right? Yeah. Just
and the warm ups in the lines. Like sometimes if there's a blue belt,
too,
if I'm standing next to a blue belt or a purple belt or whatever, I'll obviously move behind them. But it's not like you go out of your way to make sure that everyone's in stripe order, everyone's in belt order.
I'll mention stuff every now and again, but it's more for the benefit of my students if they travel and train somewhere else. The reason I don't enforce the etiquette in the gym is because I spend more time in just educating my students on being good people and training partners, that all the other stuff becomes redundant.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Cool. So we do have one more question. This question is from Alex, who is a blue belt. What is the most important factor for progressing in BJJ? Learning techniques, drilling, rolling, studying, YouTube videos, or competing? Or is a great coach the key? It's a great question from Alex.
Good question. I mean, having a great coach is going to help a lot, right? But what is the most important thing? Oh, man. I don't know. I think jiu-jitsu is such a difficult sport with so much to learn. I think there's so many different ways to learn. Is one better than the other? It's going to depend on the individual, right? Some people are much more visual. They're going to learn. I forget the scientific words for the different.
Like visual, auditory.
Yeah, exactly,
kinetic,
right?
Yeah.
So some people are going to learn more by watching. Some people are going to learn more by doing. So that's up to you as the individual. I think the most important thing you can do to progress is have discipline and turn up, right? Like it's time on the mats. People sometimes go, I'm unmotivated. Well, man, screw motivation. Motivation comes and goes. You have to be disciplined.
So showing up to class consistently.
Showing up to class, right? Yeah, being consistent, right, is always that's the most important thing. In terms of which way you learn, it's going to depend on the individual. But I will just add on to it that I think competing is super important. I don't mean you have to be a competitor, but the analogy I always give is if you need to compete every now and again just to keep yourself in check. If you don't compete, it's kind of like being on a casual, soccer team but you never actually play a game of soccer. You only just turn up to training. And you train to play soccer, but you never play a match of soccer. You got to compete every now and again. If you're not a competitor, that's cool. You just into jiu-jitsu for the hobby side of it. Compete once a year or something. I think it's important.
Right.
But more importantly, just discipline, turning up.
So if we were to pick, say for example, you have two individuals, everything's equal across the board. They both train consistently as many times per week. One of them in their spare time, maybe once or twice per week watches a couple of YouTube instructionals or works their way through a BJJ Fanatics instructional or whatever, something like that. And then the other one is, competing twice a year. Would you say that the person that's competing twice a year would progress would benefit more from that than watching a YouTube video or two a week?
If the only variable is that, like, because obviously it could be a lot of variables, but yeah, if the only variable is that one is watching some instructionals and the other's competing, in my opinion, the guy or girl competing is going to progress more.
Right. And I would just say from personal experience as a white belt, after I've competed 3 times. Unfortunately, all the other competitions that I've signed up for had been postponed and cancelled due to the COVID situation in Australia at the moment as of this recording. But I've competed 3 times, and after every single time, there is always a realignment of my own, not just ego, but my own training intensity. So when you come back to the mats after a comp, you really understand, okay, this is maybe I thought I was training hard, but I'm not.
You weren't.
I'm not training hard at all. I'm not training with the same intensity. And yeah, you
got to be reminded of that.
Oh yeah,
you can do jiu-jitsu for a hobby and do it casually, and that's all well and good. But if you want to look at the sport, it is a full contact combat sport. It's hard, right? If you're looking at the sport itself, and competition reminds you of that.
Right. So be consistent, show up to class and compete a couple times, even if you're not a quote-unquote competitor.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much to Alex for that question. And thanks to everyone that submitted their
thanks
questions.
For those questions, guys. They were good. Could, obviously even just one of those questions, we could do a whole episode just talking about the one question.
Yeah.
So they were good questions. I believe we're going to do that again in the future, right? And
yeah,
sort
absolutely.
of be a little bit of a recurring episode.
Yes. So Ask a Black Belt Q&A will definitely be a reoccurring segment. If you have a question that you want us to talk about on the show, if you want Adam to answer or what have you, feel free to submit your questions to the show at Adam's personal gym Instagram at Alliance Sydney BJJ. Always forget the order. Alliance Sydney BJJ. And you can always hit me up on my personal Instagram as well at Kieren Lefebvre. Pretty easy to find, lol. Kieren, and the Lefebvre is Lefevre. We're going to establish a podcast-specific social media channel soon, so you'll be able to outreach to that specifically. But until then,
guys, I don't know. Stay fresh, I guess.
Stay daisy fresh. All right. Thanks for listening. And if you want to support the show, feel free to leave us a review on your streaming platform of choice and to follow us on your streaming platform of choice.
Do it.
Thanks for listening.
Later.